Hello again. My name is Father Lee McLeod, and I'm the pastor here at St. Aidan's Anglican Church. I want to thank you for joining me again for Kingdom Tales. We're reading together The Tales of the Restoration by David and Karen Maines. This is the third book in the Kingdom Tales series that they've written. I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and a very young son. And each one of them is fascinating and unique. And I love all of the fascinating and unique things about each of them. My oldest daughter is wonderful at knowing how people are feeling and then helping them right where they are. She can walk into a room full of people and she can tell who needs help, and then she goes to those people and finds out ways that she can help them right here and right now, right where they are. My youngest daughter is probably the most creative person that I know. I constantly find her inventing new ways to play games and inventing new kinds of stories for herself and for everyone else to live in. She's constantly telling stories and creating new kinds of art and new kinds of images and new kinds of sculpture all of the time. My son is still very young, and so we don't know his personality yet quite as well as other people. But I will tell you that he is very, very good at making funny faces. Has anyone ever told you the things that you are good at? Have you ever thought that maybe you're good at something for a reason? That maybe you are fast, or maybe you are strong, or maybe you are clever, or maybe you are kind, or maybe you are creative, or maybe you are funny. Because that's the way that Jesus wants you to be you. That Jesus loves you just the way you are right now. If no one's told you that today, then I want you to hear it from me. Jesus loves you, and He made you the way that you are. Today's story is called The Girl with the Very Loud Outside Voice. Agatha Ann was a little girl with a very loud outside voice. Her mother kept saying to her, Agatha Ann, please use your gentle inside voice. Your outside voice is too loud for indoors. Agatha Ann tried. She would speak her next thought quietly, but after a while she would forget. Hey! She would shout when she was shopping with Mother. Can we buy some pretzel treats? Can I carry the shopping basket? Are there any long breads for supper? People covered their ears. Windows rattled. Vendors way on the other side of the mercantile exchange raised their eyebrows as if to say to one another, Yep, Agatha Ann is here again. You know, the little girl with a loud outside voice. Agatha Ann's mother would warn her, Now, Agatha Ann, if you can't use a gentle inside voice, I can't take you with me to the mercantile exchange. And Agatha Ann would promise. She certainly would use her gentle inside voice. Yes, she would. Please, please take her. She would be good. She would remember. Agatha Ann loved the mercantile exchange. It was a wondrous bazaar in the middle of Bright City, set up in a historic structure once called the Pagoda. Here, tradesmen and women unfurled their canopies over their booths. Homegrown fruits and vegetables were piled on brightly patterned cloths. Free samples, apple slices, broken tidbits of cracker, crumpled raisin cakes were all given for testing. People traded what they didn't want for what they did want. Several wide outer aisles circled the wonderful displays of inside booths. Here, children whose parents were shopping could play games with their friends. They could slide on slick boards. They could hop double-scotch jump rope. They could loop the loop by rolling hoops. Jugglers and sleight of hand masters, puppeteers and stilt walkers kept the children entertained so they would not become tired and cranky and test their parents' patience. No one bought more than they needed in the mercantile exchange so that demand would not exceed supply. Huge bins stood at the outside entrances and exits. Here, shoppers and merchants donated what was excess, so the poor children would have a few nice toys, some warm and new clothes, shoes without holes in the soles, and fresh, healthy food. It was a testimony to the power of Agatha Ann's loud outside voice that it could be heard over the happy clamor of the mercantile exchange. Vendors shouted, "Melons! New potatoes! Tomatoes! Rutabagas!" Shoppers and sellers bartered. "Give you this for that. Give you this for that." Yet the little girl's voice could be heard from one side to another, and people covered their ears when she spoke. "Hey, Mom! Can I play in the outside ring? Can I go buy some good grain cookies for some of my friends? Can I have a coin to put in the share bin?" Agatha Ann tried to use her gentle inside voice, but she always forgot, much to her mother's embarrassment. One day, while the two were shopping for lamb's wool to knit into sweaters, Agatha Ann cried, "Oh, let's get green wool! I love green wool!" And 5 windows at the opposite side of the exchange cracked and shattered. It was then that the members of the Mercantile Meister Board approached Agatha Ann's mother. These were the market masters who decided which merchants should sell wares in which booths. The Meister Board regulated prices, checked to see that the scales were honest and the registers true. It made sure that all goods were artfully displayed, that the hot food sold by vendors was not only tasty but nourishing, that happy events were planned for the many children who came shopping with their parents. "Sorry to say," the chief mercantile master explained, "Agatha Ann's outside voice was just too loud for inside." Many sellers and buyers had complained about this before. The board would like to suggest a solution. When Agatha Ann came to the exchange with her mother, if she would just wait in the cold storing locker where the cuts of meat were hung and prepared, ice chips made, and fast freezing vats froze food, then, they said, her very loud outside voice would not bother so many other shoppers, and she could use it inside as much as she liked without hurting anyone's ears. This solution made everyone happy. The other shoppers were happy, the vendors and sellers were happy, Agatha's mother was happy. Whenever the two came to the mercantile exchange, Agatha Ann would go to the door of the cold storing locker and knock. Then she would enter and sit on a cold, hard bench. She would bundle herself in a coat, pull out her mittens, even in summer, and shiver. "I will learn to use my gentle inside voice all the time when I'm inside. I will speak nothing above a whisper," she would say to herself over and over and over. But the next thing she knew, despite all her efforts, sitting all alone in the cold storing locker, she would suddenly realize she was shouting, "I will never use my very loud outside voice again!" Yes, everyone was pleased with this solution, except Agatha Ann. She was not happy about it at all. She missed the busy buying and selling, bright stripes of canopies over booths, the free cookies and banana halves, and fresh strawberry treats. She wanted so much to watch the wondrous magicians and jugglers. She wanted to drop her hard-saved pennies and her still good outgrown clothes into the share bins. She wasn't a bad little girl. She just had a very loud outside voice that she couldn't remember not to use inside. But people who heard her very loud outside voice never got to know how hard she tried to be quiet, how much she practiced speaking softly. Tears dropped onto her cheeks and froze like delicate, flakes of tissue. One day, as Agatha Ann was sitting on the cold, hard bench practicing over and over her gentle inside voice, she heard someone ask a question. "Why, little girl, whatever are you doing here?" Agatha Ann looked up into the kind face of a woman all dressed in white. She was wearing a white fur cap, white earmuffs, a white coat, white gloves, white leggings, and soft white felt boots. "I'm practicing my gentle inside voice!" shouted Agatha Ann, not realizing she was really using her very loud outside voice inside again. A large cloud of vapor puffed out of the little girl's mouth and floated to the ceiling. "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "Some people call me the Ice Lady." "Say, you make wonderful puffs of air breaths. You must have a very loud outside voice. I can even hear you while wearing my earmuffs. I can't hear most people who speak in gentle inside voices. I have to lift my earmuffs and then my ears get red and chapped, particularly if these people have a lot to say. I have chilblains when I get home at night after listening to them. But I can hear you just fine. It's quite nice." Large tears swelled in Agatha Ann's eyes. They dropped down her cheeks toward her ears, making her look as though her face was sprinkled in chipped diamonds. This was the first time anyone had ever said anything nice about her very loud outside voice. She had always thought there must be something good about being so noisy. "What do you do?" the little girl asked. The Ice Lady laughed because she could actually hear Agatha Ann's words. Her laugh formed a thin sheet of ice breath, which cracked as it came out of her mouth and fell at their feet into 100 sparkling shards. "Oh, I'm the Cold Meister. I make sure that the cold storing locker works. Today it seems to be working exceptionally well." She sat down beside Agatha Ann on the hard bench. "Did the Mercantile Meister Board decide that you should come in here?" Agatha Ann sniffed her nose and nodded her head yes. The frozen tears on her cheeks glistened, flying up and down as she shook her head. "They say my outside voice is too loud for inside, and I can't seem to learn how to use my gentle inside voice. They say that people have complained." They say. The Coldmeister shook her head. "Well, we have to remember the market meisters are well-meaning folk. They have to be concerned about what's good for everyone in the mercantile exchange, fair prices and a pleasant environment for shopping and such." The woman in white patted the little girl's mittens with her own gloved hand. But it would have been nice if someone had seen the wonder in having a very loud outside voice. Agatha Ann looked up in surprise. "Does your mother know how wonderful your outside voice is?" The little girl sighed, hunched her shoulders, and looked down. "No. She just wishes I could learn to use my gentle inside voice." Well, we have to remember that mothers are also well-meaning folk. They have to be concerned about raising children who will behave properly and whom other people will like. This, we must not forget, is a very difficult task. Together the two sat in silence, thinking about these difficult jobs. The rumble of the ice chip machine could be heard in the locker. "I wonder," said the Coldmeister, "since everything seems to be working exceptionally well today, if you might have time for me to tell you a story." And without waiting for an answer, since it was obvious to them both that Agatha Ann had lots of time, the woman in white began. "Once there was a little girl about your age, or maybe a little younger, who used to cry and screech at the worst of moments, at the very worst of moments." For a minute the lady in white paused, and her eyes seemed to gaze to a faraway place a long time ago. "This little girl lived when the evil enchanter ruled the city with terrible enchantments, before the good king gave himself at Burning Place to free the city from the spells. You've heard about that time, haven't you?" Agatha Ann nodded her head. "Well, this little girl was an orphan. She didn't have a nice mommy like you. And in the old days, before the king came out of exile, orphans belonged to the enchanter. And this little orphan was a sewer rat, part of the crews of forced child labor in the underwater systems of sewer pipes and boilers. And because she was so little, she could crawl into places the bigger rats and brats couldn't reach. But she was always afraid, and because she was always afraid and cold and hungry, she cried a lot. And when she was really afraid, she screeched and hollered and called for her mama, who was long dead. And when she screeched, the enchanter's evil workers made her walk barefoot over hot coals. This was called firing. You've heard about firing, haven't you? Yes, Agatha Ann had. She sat on the bench quietly, her eyes very wide and her own tears forgotten. What happened to the little girl? Without even trying, Agatha Ann had spoken in a gentle inside voice. The ice lady replied, her voice also soft. Oh, she was part of the orphan exodus. You remember that the king freed the children from the enchanter. Agatha Ann remembered that part of the story. It was a tale all the children of Bright City loved. And to tell the truth, she never wanted to be in a hot place again. You should see the bottoms of her feet. Talk about calluses. Someone found her a job working in the cold storing locker. And one day, because she did her job so well, the market meisters appointed her to be the cold meister. You! Shouted Agatha Ann. You were the orphan girl who screeched and screamed at the worst of moments. I certainly was. And do you know what I learned? I learned the king really loves little girls with very loud outside voices. Really? Said Agatha Ann, her voice soft again without her knowing it. The coldmeister shook her head. Yes, and look at what has happened. Not many want to work here in this cold, but I'm content and most happy despite Joblins. I'm a worker for the restoration by doing my cold job well. Can you keep a secret? I think the cold storing locker is one of the most beautiful places in the whole city. That's wonderful! Agatha Ann shouted, and this time she didn't even try to be quiet. A puff of air breath bounced from her mouth and flew to the frosted pipes of the ceiling, and it was then for the first time that Agatha Ann looked around and saw how truly beautiful the inside of the cold storing locker really was. Icicles hung like crystal pendants from the pipes and the ceilings. Hanging lanterns cast a soft glow that shimmered with blue and yellow and white prisms of light on the walls and the floor and the ceilings. Frost spangled every surface with its own kaleidoscope of colors. It was lovely, she thought, clean, and a secret with little to no dirt showing anywhere. Little girl with the very loud outside voice, said the coldmeister, I have a wonderful idea. Your outside voice is exactly what I need inside. Your air breath must be very warm. When I do my paperwork, I have to take off my gloves, and my fingers get stiff with the cold. Why don't you come to my office while your mother is shopping and talk to me with your outside voice so you can make the space where I work very warm indeed? And that is exactly what Agatha Ann did from that day on. She would knock on the door of the cold storing locker, take a running start, and slide along the icy corridor to the office of the woman in white. Hey, I'm here, she would shout. And then, in her very loud outside voice, she would tell the coldmeister all the things that she had done that day. Puff after puff of steam air breath filled the room, and the coldmeister would sigh contentedly and smile and take off her gloves. Nodding her head as Agatha Ann chattered, she would quickly finish her paperwork. When the butchers came about the meat, or the ice chippers to inquire about bagging the ice chips, or the freeze dryers to discuss the timing of the drying, the coldmeister didn't even have to remove her earmuffs. She would simply say to Agatha Ann, would you repeat that for me? And Agatha Ann would use her very loud outside voice to tell the coldmeister what the others had said. If the woman couldn't hear, she would say, "Louder, child, louder." And Agatha Ann would repeat, but in an even louder outside voice, "How many strip steaks?" Or "A ton of ice chips have been bundled." Or "We can't fulfill the beef jerky orders. How much more should we schedule?" And the lady in white would smile again and answer all the questions. Strangely, the more the little girl used her loud outside voice inside when she was supposed to, the less she used her outside voice inside when she wasn't supposed to. One day the market meisters came to Agatha Ann's mother and said, "We hear very good reports about your daughter. We hear that she is able to use her outside voice appropriately. We would like to give her another chance in the mercantile exchange. She needn't sit in the cold any longer." Agatha Ann's mother was pleased. The vendors and buyers were pleased. Once again, Agatha Ann carried the shopping basket for her mother and enjoyed the free oranges when they were in season and placed her saved pennies in the share bin. The windows no longer rattled when she was shopping. The dealers of wares no longer covered their ears when she spoke, and her mother was never again embarrassed by her very loud outside voice inside. But unknown to all the others, Agatha Ann really preferred to stand at a certain door where most people never knocked, enter the inside chamber, all dazzling white upon white, take a running slide down the slippery, icy corridor, grabbing an icicle to suck on as she whizzed past, and then talk as loudly as she pleased with the cold meister while she did her paperwork. For Agatha Ann found what everyone seeks, a place to be herself, where one person, at least, one very important person, cared that she could do what no one else could do. And strange as it might seem to some, it was here in the cold that she was always warm.